Okay, welcome everybody to our kickoff for our systematic Avodah initiative for the Chassidus New Year. Yay! Baruch Hashem. I want to share some incredible news. The incredible news is that the incredible, absolute, amazing, stupendous Ruta Cohen took it upon herself to redo the entire book. So for everyone who has done this program in the past, just know that it is new and fresh and brand new readings. It's incredible. That said, yay, Ruta! That said, we had a bit of an issue with the printer because they're going to be properly bound. So for the meantime, I managed to print out some sneak previews so you have them for the next few days and you don't miss your readings. And then we're going to provide the full book Be'ezus Hashem on Wednesday. So everyone's welcome to come and pick it up or come and arrange with one of us to come pick up your book after Wednesday. So that's coming. But just to show you, it is beautifully redone, new readings. It has new photos. The whole setting is just incredible. And we changed most of the readings, and we even added new sources from Chassidus here. So for everyone who loves the Chassidus here, some of the amazing content from there is put on here. We take no credit for writing it. We did adapt it though, because we had to shorten and summarize certain parts, and that all that credit goes to Ruta. So shout out yet again to Ruta. Okay. So for everyone who has never heard of this before, this is part of a program that we do where it usually comes like as a bound book. And there is one page of reading, literally, and this page, for example, is half of it is a photo. So just staring at the nice guy jumping off a thing already counts. So we do one page of reading a day. So this is for the 3rd of Kislev. And over here, there's an exercise, something to think about. We also provide you with, oh boy, I didn't bring honey in the black bag in the back. Do you mind getting me the journals? Wait, no, you just passed it on the bench, the one in the back. Yes, that one should have them. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're providing everybody with a Living Chassidus journal. I don't know if you could see there we go. The Living Chassidus journal, and inside there's pages with lines. And this is your personal journal between you and Hashem. We trust you, and it's a trust program. So when you say you did a journal, we believe you and we trust you. Honor system, thank you. And so the way that works is that our goal is for everybody to really, truly live with the month of Kislev. And Ruta is incredible because she even took it further into the month of Teves. So there's going to be an extra week that was added. And the goal is that so many of us show up at a farbrengen. It's Yud Daled Kislev. It's the Rebbe and the Rebbe's anniversary. We show up at a farbrengen hoping and expecting that someone's going to come inspire us. And they want to share whatever it is, and we just show up to waiting to receive. And that's beautiful and all. But it is even more powerful when you know what's going on, when you know what happened, you know the beautiful details of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzins wedding leading up to it. So the readings leading up to, there we go. The readings leading up to the holidays, for example, this one says History of Tes and Yud Kislev Part 1, and that's one page of reading. History of Tes and Yud Kislev Part 2. So you are building up your knowledge in preparation for the upcoming holiday. And the readings in between are self-growth, coming from Chassidus specifically. So for example, the value of adrenaline. When is adrenaline meant to be beneficial and when is it not meant to be beneficial? Not all of us need to run around headless chickens all the time, and we really shouldn't. That's not the healthiest way to live. So we brought in different articles from different sources. This one particularly is from the Meaningful Life Center, so a huge shout out to them. And I want to give a shout out to the Meaningful Life Center, to Chassidus Hair, to Chabad.org, to Rabbi Often. Did we take anything from? No. And to Rebbe Drive, because many of our Rebbe pictures come from Rebbe Drive. So a huge shout out to them. We take no credit for any of the content from them. Another beautiful piece of the program is that when you do your daily reading, so remember it's just one page, and at least once a week you journal in your journal based on the question that it's provided here as the exercise, then you get to earn a beautiful prize. Here at Living Chassidus, we are all about convincing the Nefesh HaBahamis about how incredible it is to follow the Nefesh Elikis. So in Basi Lagani from the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's a particular line where he speaks about really taking the kayach of the Nefesh HaBahamis and flipping it over to do the will of the Nefesh Elikis. And so we take it quite seriously over here, because we tell our Nefesh HaBahamis that there are some great prizes. Let me share with everybody some of the things we've done in the past. We have given from chocolate bars to lots of svarim. We have given a Rebbe picture, which is a bookmark that you can use. We have also done food to the sushi spot, food like a gift card to Boof and Bun. We have done all kinds of incredible gift cards. We have done sets of svarim. So we even gave this one out a few years ago. The entire set of the Sefer. And so every time you do your reading, you're trying to make sure to keep your Nefesh HaBahamis excited for the next upcoming thing. We actually did an umbrella, which is really beautiful. It's a huge hit. So we get very creative. We really love our prizes here at Living Chassidus. And every time we have a farbrengen, if you did your daily reading and you did at least one journal a week that you keep between you and Hashem, then you get a prize. And that's simple as that. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? Yay. Okay. So I wanted to share why we started this. Originally, we started it because there was a program in preparation of Elul and Tishrei. And throughout that time, the first year we tried it, we barely made it to Yom Kippur. It was daily reading and journaling of some, I don't remember exactly the amount, but we barely made it to Yom Kippur, and basically the whole group just kind of fizzled out. I'm like, okay, how can we do it better next year? So the next year we added farbrengens, which was really exciting because we got different speakers. They came, they shared beautiful stuff with us. But again, we barely made it through Sukkot. Everybody enjoyed the farbrengens, but very few people actually did the readings. And that's why we ended up coming with this like sweet spot of farbrengens plus journals plus prizes. And now it has been one of the most successful programs we've done. And Baruch Hashem, it has really helped so many people, not just because they're learning on a daily basis, which is huge, but also because they feel like they're really living with the times. They're living with what is expected of them, and not expected of them. They're living with what is expected at that time period, and they're preparing themselves for that. So with that, I am going to make a quick pause. Okay, so we have the great zchus to have our most famous kickoff rabbi for kickoff this year. Rabbi Glick is incredibly well known. I think his group on Facebook is one of the greatest places to find him, and also on WhatsApp and all the other social media places, right? He's amazing. He creates videos that are short and powerful, and he runs regular shirim here in Crown Heights and also in other locations. And if you'd like to check out many of his recordings, you can find him at My Judaism. That's a good place. Rabbi
Glick.link/YouTube.
RabbiGlick.link/YouTube. Okay.
We'll send it out on WhatsApp.
We will send it on WhatsApp, and also you can check out his videos on our Living Chassidus YouTube, because Baruch Hashem, he's one of our favorites and he speaks for us often. So I will stop rambling and pass it on to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So, Chodesh Kislev. Thank you. So, really, Chodesh Kislev is about Chassidus. It's about, we have Yutes Kislev, which is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, when we wish each other a good year in Limud HaChassidus and Darkei Chassidus, learning Chassidus and the ways of Chassidus. I'm just trying to gauge how much we can squeeze in. So, we'll talk a little bit about maybe learning of Chassidus, very briefly, just an overview of what it's really about and what the point really is. And then I really want to get more to focus on a specific aspect of Darkei Chassidus, which is the Rabbeim, and maybe the primary aspect, the primary thing in the role of the Rabbeim and their relationship with us, because the month of Kislev is not just Yutes Kislev, and it's not just about the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. First of all, Rosh Hashanah Chassidus of itself is called Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus because it's when the Alter Rebbe was released from prison. We have a whole series of Chassidish Yomim Tovim throughout the month, basically one after the other, all to do with various Rabbeim and their births and liberations from prison, etc. So there's a very strong aspect specifically of the Rebbeim and their relationships with us in the month of Kislev also. So just a couple minutes about generally what learning of Chassidus is about. Probably I'm not going to say anything that everybody here doesn't already know, but really, to sum up, the role and the function of learning Chassidus is basically, when we have relationships with people, right? We all have many relationships with many people, and some of our dispositions to some of those people are maybe more positive and some of them are maybe not as positive. But when we meet someone, it's not that hard to form a disposition towards them, feelings towards them, whether they're positive, whether they're negative. You meet someone really nice, you meet a really good person, it's not that hard to get to like them and to develop a good relationship with them. Why? Because you meet someone and you get to see their good qualities, you get to see the things about them that you like, and you hang out, you chat, you go for coffee, you eat lunch, whatever it is, you get to know them, and then you develop an interest in someone if they're the kind of person that you like. It's not that hard. The problem is that when it comes to Hashem, who has the greatest collection of, well, I did a talk on a similar topic to this to high school girls a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about friends and about what it takes to make a good friend. I asked the girls, what qualities does a person have to have in order to be able to be a good friend? And they were actually had some really good responses, and they talked about someone who's not going to judge, and someone who will respect you for who you are, and someone who'll put your needs first, and someone who's reliable, etc. And really they put together a very solid, their suggestions came together into a very solid collection of really good qualities. But then the second question I asked was, does the fact that someone has the qualities necessary to be a good friend necessarily mean that you're actually going to have a valuable friendship with them? And I think at first it was a bit too much of an open question. I didn't really get where I was going, but it's also hard to imagine today, because today there's no such thing. It's for people who've only really, come of age in the last few years, become a teenager even in the last few years, it's hard to imagine a reality in which you could meet someone, get to know someone well and really, really like them, and you really, really like each other. And then the person lives on the other side of the world and you don't know if you're ever going to hear from them again. There's no such thing today. You have WhatsApp, you have FaceTime, you can talk to someone every day. There's just about no such thing as someone that you like, you have no way of ever seeing on a regular basis or even knowing. Right? Once upon a time, you could meet someone, get to know them, really like them, and then you part ways and you have no idea if you're ever going to see them again. And that's why actually in the halachas of the brachas of Shechianu, if you meet someone who you really like, a really close friend, who you value, and you haven't seen them in 3 months, you say the bracha with Hashem's name, because if someone's important to you, it means a lot to see them. Now, again, it doesn't, we could go these days, you can be so much in touch with someone, you can almost forget that you haven't seen them for a while until you actually see them. And it's like, oh, whoa, I almost forgot that I was missing out on something. What's that? It's a good question, probably. I think so. I don't know. It's a good question. But, Baruch Hashem, and we're very grateful to live in this time. But once upon a time, you could meet someone and they could have all the qualities to be a good friend. But if you never see them again, if you're not in touch with them and you don't interact with them, that's not, your relationship with them is not one that's contributing towards your life. It's not one that's bringing any value to your quality of life, to your experience, because as good a person as they are, you're not interacting with them and you have no active friendship. So for a connection with someone, for a relationship with someone to actually be of value practically in your life, you have to, first of all, they have to be the kind of person who's going to make a positive contribution to your life, the kind of person who could be a good friend. But for it to actually be a good friendship and to be contributing towards your life, you have to actually be in touch with them and interacting with them. And they have to be contributing to your life. They have to be a part of your life. Otherwise, they're not making a difference to your life. Now, with Hashem, we have the opposite problem. With people, it's pretty easy to get to know someone, pretty easy to, to get to know people and to get to know whether you like them or not. And if someone's the kind of person that could be a good friend, it's not that hard to develop a friendship and a relationship with them. With people, a good friend sometimes might want to help, and sometimes we have, needs or in a situation that even the best friend might not be able to do anything. With Hashem, we have the other problem. Hashem has everything we need, and Hashem's able to give us everything we need and to help us out in every situation. And Hashem has it's also not so easy necessarily to find a person who really has all those qualities to be a really good friend. Hashem has all of those qualities built in. Hashem has all the qualities to be an entity that's going to make the most valuable of possible contributions to our life. And Hashem has what it takes to be able to help us and to give us everything that we need and everything we want. The part that's really difficult with Hashem is being able to have an active relationship, to be interactive with Hashem. Not because Hashem's not available. Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. But Hashem designed us to relate to things that we perceive with our 5 senses, right? We have eyes that see physical light, our ears hear sound waves, which are physical movements through the air. Our tongues, our taste buds sense the flavor of different molecules in food that dissolves in our mouths. We have sensors in our skin that feel touch. What did I miss? Sound. I said see. Smell. Same thing. We have olfactory nerve endings in our nose that sense molecules in our noses, that sense molecules in the air, and we experience smell. That's really the only way we have to form a perception of anything. We have 5 senses, and each of them senses physical input. Now, Hashem is not physical. Hashem is not made out of mass. Hashem's not made out of energy. So there are no physical sounds. Hashem doesn't emit physical light. There's no physical pressure. No taste and no smell. We have no way of physically perceiving Hashem. So Hashem might have all the good qualities available and have everything to offer us, but if we are not able to sense Hashem, it doesn't help us. It doesn't make any active, it can help us. Hashem could be doing things behind the scenes, but in terms of a relationship, it's non-existent. And that's really the role that Chassidus plays. The role of Chassidus is that when I said that the only way we have to perceive things is with our 5 senses, the only way we have to perceive any physical input, but we do have another source of input, and that's here. We can learn, right? Let's take, for example, a person. You can meet someone and hang out with them and get lunch and talk to them and get to know them. And then with your 5 senses, you're collecting data about them with your brain, and you put together an image and you like the person, and then you like them. And there you go. You can also come to like someone who you've never met if you hear about them. And sometimes you hear so much about a person that you already form an image of that person, and you start to develop a disposition towards that person. Maybe you like them, maybe you don't, depending on what you heard, but you can form a disposition towards someone because you put together an image of them based on all the things you heard. So you're collecting data with your head, even if you're not getting the physical data, you're hearing it, you're learning about them. And that can effectively do the same sort of thing. And that's what Chassidus is about. Because it's all nice and dandy to know that Hashem exists. And yes, we can daven to Hashem. And yes, Hashem can give us everything we want. And yes, Hashem can satisfy our needs, our physical needs, all of our needs really. But one of the most, not only necessary needs, but one of the needs that brings us the most fulfillment when it's satisfied, that's not me, is it? My phone, no. Is the need for connection and for relationship. And every one of us has the potentially the ability to have a personal human connection and relationship with Hashem. And that's exactly why the Alter Rebbe refused to go along with his colleagues, with the other students of the Baal Shem Tov, who were tzaddikim and had followings of Chassidim, and the Chassidim would, go along with them, and they would sort of ride the wave of their Rebbe's connection to Hashem, and they would get all the benefits and the brachas and everything else. The Alter Rebbe said, it's very nice that you're giving your Chassidim brachas and blessings and connection to Hashem, etc., but they're not getting their own relationship and connection to Hashem. And that's the most important and fulfilling and rewarding of all things you could possibly give them. And if you're giving them everything else but that, it's almost like they're really getting jibbed. So the Alter Rebbe said, I want every Jew to have the opportunity to have their own personal connection with Hashem and their own actual human, interactive, emotional relationship with Hashem. Now, I can't help them hear or see or feel or taste or smell Hashem, but the Alter Rebbe created a discipline of learning about Hashem in detail, in ways that we can actually start to understand things and form some sort of understanding of what Hashem is versus what Hashem isn't. And as our image of what Hashem is starts to develop and to become more complex and more well-rounded and more broad and more deep, Hashem can start to actually become something real to us, and we really can start to feel a sense of connection to Hashem and a sense of relationship with Hashem. And that's the most fulfilling thing a person could ever have. And that's why the Alter Rebbe refused to just have a relationship with Hashem and allow his Chassidim to ride the wave of that, but to give every single one of us the tools to understand as much as humanly possible about Hashem so that we can have our own personal, experiential relationship with Hashem. And that's what Chassidus is about. Chassidus is about the opportunity to make Hashem real for ourselves so that Hashem can actually be a part of our lives. And everything that Hashem has to offer can not only give us stuff, but can actually start to mean something in our experience, and we can actually have a relationship, a human, personal, emotional, experiential connection and relationship with Hashem. And the only way to really do that is for Hashem to become real to us, and the only way for that to happen is by learning about Hashem, and that's the whole point of Chabad Chassidus. So that's what learning Chassidus is about. Now, Darkei Chassidus, and about really with a focus on the role of a Rebbe, there's a story when they were coming actually to arrest the Alter Rebbe. The story goes that he turned to Shmuel Munkus and asked him, should I let them take me to prison? And Shmuel Munkus said, yeah, why not? Shmuel Munkus, was known as a bit of a joker. And he said, but this wasn't so much a joke, actually. And he said, why not? You have no reason not to let them. If you are a Rebbe, what's going to happen? They'll take you to prison. What's going to happen? Nothing. They can't really do anything to you anyway. And if you're not a Rebbe and you dared to write the Sefer of Tanya and to convince people to give up their pleasure in their interest and pleasure in the pleasure that materialism has to offer, and you convince people to redirect themselves away from material pleasure, and you did that without really being a Rebbe, then you belong in prison. The question is, what does that mean? If it's a good thing to convince people to, to elevate themselves and to redirect themselves away from material pleasure towards becoming more spiritually oriented, and that's a good thing, then it's a good thing whether he's a Rebbe or not, and he did a good thing. And if it's a bad thing, what? If you're a Rebbe, then it's okay to do a bad thing, but if you're not a Rebbe, then you deserve to go to prison for doing a bad thing? Like, is it a good thing or a bad thing? What difference does it make whether he's a Rebbe or not? If it's a bad thing to do, you belong in prison for doing a bad thing. Because you're a Rebbe, then you get off the hook for doing a bad thing. Obviously, that's not what he was saying. So the question is, what was he saying? Why is it that if he's not a Rebbe, then to write Tanya and to convince people to direct themselves away from worldly pleasure would be a bad thing, but if he's a Rebbe, it would be a good thing? And Shmuel Munkus was no, I mean, he joked a lot, but as a person, he was no joke. He was a very, very serious person who took life. He had his own style of serving Hashem, but it was something that was very real to him. And even his jokes weren't really jokes. So the question is, what's the message here? Because something here doesn't seem to add up. Now, obviously it does add up. The question is how and why. What does it mean? So, going back to what we were saying before about Hashem, talk about the fact that we can't see Hashem. Hashem is everywhere. We can't see Hashem. Why can't we see Hashem?
He made it that way.
Okay, so everyone here is giving much deeper answers. Good. The basic answer that, I was hoping someone would say, and I guess it's good that you all didn't, is that he's invisible. And that's like really not the answer. Hashem's not invisible. Air is invisible, right? This room is full of air. And why can't you see air? Because it's invisible. It's a gas. It doesn't have any color. It's invisible. Hashem's not invisible. Hashem isn't a physical thing. It's a completely different ballgame, right? Something that's invisible, but the air, I remember the first time I was trying to explain to my oldest daughter when she was younger, when she's, I don't know how old, maybe 3, 4, I don't know, what air is. And the fact that this space is filled with air. And it's like, what do you mean it's filled with air? What does that mean? There's nothing in here. It's empty. And I told her, pick up your hand and move it very quickly. And you feel the resistance of the air against your hand. If you wave it quickly, you can feel there's something there. You don't see it. And we're so used to it that generally when we're moving around, we don't notice the contact with the air because it's a constant thing that we're used to. When you move a little faster and the pressure builds up, you can feel the air. There's something there. So there's something physical that's occupying this space. It's molecules of mostly nitrogen and some oxygen and a few other things mixed in. And it's here. It's just pretty soft and it moves around quickly. So if you move fast enough, you can start to feel it. Why can't you see it? Because it's invisible. That's what invisible means. It's something that's physically here, but you can't see it. Hashem's not invisible. Hashem's not made out of molecules. Hashem, well, before we get to Hashem, Hashem's already like way, way too far out. Angels, malachim. Why can't you see angels? Same thing, because they're invisible? No, because they're not physical. You can see things that are made out of physical mass, and if something is made out of physical matter and it reflects physical light, and that light reflects off that object into your eyes, you see it. Right? When you see this, well, it's black. It's not the best of examples, but it's not totally black. You can see it. You can see some reflection and some glare. Why? Because light's bouncing off here into your eyes. So you see it.
It's interesting. It's not physical, but it's here.
What?
Like you're saying, like angels.
Right.
They're not physical, but they're here. So
right.
Is there just to go off on is there an opinion that says angels are like made out of air and fire or something like that? Is that like a thing? Or I'm just going off.
No. It depends what you mean, because there is this idea of angels of different things, and there are seraphim which are angels of fire, but there really it's more of metaphorical fire, where it describes the specific nature of that kind of angel has things in common with the nature of physical fire. So they're called angels of fire. So yes, there is such a thing, but it's more of what's more metaphorical than literal. Because angels don't physically, I mean, angels, you could accurately say that angels don't exist, depending on what you mean. If what you mean is angels don't exist as far as the parameters that define physical existence are concerned, it's true. They're not physical. They're not made out of physical mass and energy. As far as the physical reality is concerned, angels don't exist. Because they're not physical. They're not, what's that? Correct. So they're no less real than that which is physical, but they are not physical. It's a different layer of reality. So we can accept that angels exist. We're never going to actually experience them with any of our five senses because they're not physical, and our five senses are there to sense that which is physical. There are exceptions when angels present physically, like in the story of Avraham Avinu, etc., which we had a couple of weeks ago in the parasha, but those are exceptions when something unusual happened, right? So angels are not physical. And the vast majority of reality is not physical. The physical universe is physical, but that's Olam Hasiya Hagashmi, the physical layer of reality. Then there's Yitzira, and there's Bria, and there's Atzilus, and then there's before the Tzimtzum, and there's Sovev and Mamale. The physical reality is a tiny, tiny little fraction of everything that exists. So really, we're missing out on the ability to have any sort of relationship with the majority of existence, and certainly with Hashem, because Hashem's certainly not physical. Hashem really, if you want to go all the way out there, Hashem's neither physical nor spiritual. Hashem created the categories of physical and of spirituality. And spirituality is a creation as much as physical matter is. Both are created by Hashem. So to be able to perceive Hashem or have any sort of experiential interaction with Hashem is technically impossible, which is like a little bit sad, maybe a little bit depressing, or it could be, except for the fact that there's a solution, there's a way out. Now, really, these two parts here, I would say maybe two of the, well, we'll take a step back. You know, we live, Baruch Hashem, we live in an amazing time to be alive, despite what the news will try to convince you. And the irony of that is just amazing, because you have people who are going to sit and wherever you go, whether you're looking at the news on television or on YouTube or on Facebook or TikTok, it doesn't matter where you go, there's someone who's there trying to convince you that it's a terrible time to be alive and the world is a terrible place right now and times are so bad. The irony in that is that usually the person who's trying to convince you about how bad a time it is to be alive is getting paid like $1 million a week to sit in an air-conditioned studio in front of a camera for an hour a day to convince you about how bad a time it is to be alive. FYI, just pointing that out. It's an amazing time to be alive. I remember hearing from my grandfather, I mean, he went through the concentration camps, but forget the concentration camps before the war. Just life as a person was so difficult, you know, and that was already after the Industrial Revolution. For the majority, for almost the entirety of human history, for just about everyone, with very few exceptions, life has always been brutal. It's probably literally the case that literally a homeless person, an actual person who's literally homeless in America today, in many ways has far better quality of life than an uber wealthy person had 300 years ago. You don't have to go back 300, 150 probably, certainly 200 or 300 years ago. First of all, they have a cell phone. They have entirety of human knowledge in their hand. Most do. You can go, they could go anywhere and use a bathroom with running water. Chances are, if they, you know, get an infection, they can get hold of some antibiotics. 200 years ago, it didn't matter how much money someone had. They got pneumonia, their kid got in a cut that got infected, they got tetanus, they got gangrene. That was the end of it. Didn't matter how much money someone had. Forget about that. Summer, when it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, there was no air conditioning. It didn't matter how much money someone had. You know, like just little basic things that we take so for granted. We're so lucky to live in such an amazing time. My grandfather told stories 100 years ago. Just about everyone had to work from dawn until dusk just to have a piece of bread and a cup of water to drink, a piece of bread to eat and a cup of water to drink. From when they were basically old enough to do anything, 5, 6 years old, kids were going to work already. We live in such an amazing time. Baruch Hashem. And, one of probably the most amazing things that we have is the availability of information. What's so amazing about that? The democratization of information, aka Google, basically, means that if someone has an interest and they're prepared to put in the effort, they can probably find out whatever they need to find out to start, making the most of that interest they have, to start following it up, start integrating it into their life, following their passion, whatever it is. There's, whatever information you need for almost anything today is available for free if you just sit down and Google. And in a way, what the Alter Rebbe did with Chassidus is the same sort of thing. He democratized the ability to have a personal relationship with Hashem through information. It's the same thing. The information that the Alter Rebbe gave us in a somewhat relatively tangible, detailed, broken down way that we can actually start to work with it and understand, and it can start to mean something to us. The Alter Rebbe made that available to everyone, where it used to be exclusive, the same way that Google made all of information available to everyone where it used to be exclusive. Which means that now that the Alter Rebbe did that, and now that we have 7 generations of Chassidus since then, of Chabad Chassidus, anyone who wants for Hashem to be a real part of their life has the necessary information available. It's just a matter of going out and getting it. And another thing, that I think is a real sort of a hallmark of how affluent society is today. And it's an amazing thing. And I think it's, it's something that can really bring a lot of value to a lot of people, is all the different variations of coaching, right? Today, there's sort of the more clinical psychotherapy, and then you have therapists, and then there's this sort of continuous spectrum that goes from psychotherapy to therapists, and then sort of blends in along a spectrum into coaching, and then there is, sort of intermediate therapy / coaching, and then there's like actual just life coaches and business coaches and all. And I think that, probably a large number of the people who are offering coaching services don't have much to offer anyone more than they can figure out themselves. But there are people out there who could really offer a lot of value as a coach. What can a coach offer that you can't get from a book or from Google, for that matter? Experience, right? Sometimes you can have all the information in the world, but to know how to put that information together, or how to utilize that information, or how to put it into practice, sometimes if you can speak to someone who has put in the time and the effort and has years or decades of experience of what implementing that information actually looks like, and you can learn from their mistakes, and you can have the benefit of their wisdom and their insight that they have as a result of their experience, you basically get to have access to their experience and to everything they've learned. You can get to have, to a degree, access to whatever they have access to. Now, they might have gone through years or decades of hard work and learning from mistakes and all these things to get that access. And, if you can get someone like that to coach you, you can benefit from all of their wisdom and experience, because in coaching you, they're giving you access to that. And it's an amazing thing if you find someone who's actually good. And in a large part, I think I wouldn't say it's a mashal for, perhaps one of the most important parts of a Rebbe, and what we have to benefit through a relationship with a Rebbe. I would say, rather than a mashal or a metaphor, I would say it's an equivalent. And the equivalence is that which isn't physical, spirituality, divinity, godliness, Atzilus and Bria and Ein Sof, and ultimately Hashem himself, all of those things exist and are real, but we don't have the hardware to tune in. right? This room, I assume, I didn't check my Wi-Fi on my phone, but presumably there's Wi-Fi in here. And if there's not Wi-Fi in here, there's Wi-Fi most places you go, right? If someone, let's say someone was, frozen in suspended animation 100 years ago, and then they would defrost them now and tell them that, there's Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi, what's that? And you would say, well, it's like access. First of all, you have to explain what the internet is. And if you can explain to them what the internet is, and then you tell them actually the internet's just like in the air, you just have to have a device that has a Wi-Fi antenna inside, which you can't see because antennas basically are just built into the hardware now. And you just have to have a device that's Wi-Fi enabled, and then you can just access everything that exists basically in the universe. They'd probably think you were nuts. They'd have no idea what you're talking about. But ultimately, the Wi-Fi is here. Someone who doesn't understand what Wi-Fi is going to have no idea what you mean because it's invisible. You can't see it. You can't sense it. You need to have a Wi-Fi enabled device. And if your device is Wi-Fi enabled, it'll pick up the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is here, whether you pick up on it or not. The question is, do you have the hardware? Hashem is here, right here in this room, but we don't have the hardware. Our hardware is tuned to that which exists physically with our 5 senses. We don't have the hardware to be receptive to spirituality, to godliness, to Hashem.
We have an neshama.
Right. We have a neshama.
Is that software?
Which, I would say that the neshama is the hardware, but imagine that you have a phone, which is Wi-Fi enabled, but on top of that phone, you have an OtterBox, and then you wrap it up in you bury it in concrete to protect it because you don't want it to break. It's like, yes, your phone's very safe inside the concrete. It's also not going to be able to do anything for you because your phone has Wi-Fi, but number one, it can't tap into the Wi-Fi because it can't reach it through the concrete. Number two, you can't tap into your phone because it's buried in concrete. It's kind of like the situation that the neshama is in, right? So yes, 100% the neshama has the hardware. It maybe is the hardware, forget has the hardware, but and this is exactly the point. It's buried under so many layers of nefesh abahamis and opaque perspective and
Like there is
to a degree.
Like chapter 18 and 19 talks about that 6th sense.
To a degree, but ultimately, as long as we're a human being and a regular human being, part of the human experience is that there are just thick layers of concrete over the neshama. We can make them a little bit thinner, relatively speaking, but there's only so thin we can go. And that's really the thing that distinguishes a Rebbe from everyone else.
So Rebbe naturally has that sense, hasn't, so to speak, that no concrete on top of it.
Exactly. All the layers of a Rebbe, the nefesh habahamis of a Rebbe and the body of a Rebbe, all of that, it's there, but it's transparent. It's not opaque. If you have a phone, right, all of our phones are surrounded by matter. They're surrounded by air. Air happens to not interfere that much with the Wi-Fi, and it's fine. It's only when it's concrete that it's a problem. So we all have our bodies, and our nefesh habahamis is all like layers of concrete on top of the neshama. So it has the hardware, but it's a struggle for the neshama to be, well, not really, but it's really a struggle for us to be able to get what the neshama is plugged into. But a Rebbe doesn't have those opaque coverings. And so a Rebbe has a strong signal. A Rebbe is plugged into the Wi-Fi. A Rebbe is able to actually have a human sensory experience of Hashem. Not necessarily with physical senses per se, but a Rebbe can experience the senses of the neshama in a way that we can't, because the concrete's not there. It's covered with, with air, let's say, maybe instead of concrete. And the same way that when a person develops a good relationship with someone that has a lot of experience and wisdom, they can benefit from that other person's experience and wisdom through that relationship with that person. As we develop a connection and a relationship with the Rebbe, we can benefit from the fact that the Rebbe is plugged into Elokus, and the fact that the Rebbe actually gets to experience it consciously because the Wi-Fi is in full effect and there's nothing in between the Rebbe's conscious experience and the Wi-Fi signal. There's no concrete overlaying the Wi-Fi hardware, stopping the Rebbe from being able to experience that consciously. And by developing our relationship with the Rebbe, we are able to actually earn for ourselves the ability to have a sensory experience of godliness in a way that a human cannot naturally have, because the Rebbe can have it. And when we make, when we decide to develop a relationship with the Rebbe that's equivalent of a relationship with a coach, and by having that relationship, you get access to what they have access to. When we develop a relationship with the Rebbe, we get access to what the Rebbe has access to, which is an actual human, not just conscious awareness through learning. That's something we can all achieve through learning Chassidus. But beyond that, a Rebbe can have a human sensory experience of godliness. That's something we can't have on our own. But if we develop a real relationship with the Rebbe, that's something we are then able to have. And now coming back to the answer that Shmuel Munkus said to the Alter Rebbe, right? A human being needs to have a sense of pleasure. We need to have things that bring us pleasure and bring us joy in life. It's a necessity that we need to have if we're going to have any chance of surviving life. And so Shmuel Munkus said, if you really are a Rebbe, and because you're a Rebbe, you are plugged in, your Wi-Fi signal is clear, and you're able to experience everything that the Wi-Fi gives your neshama access to. You're able to actually have a sensory experience of godliness through your neshama, because there's nothing getting in the way. There are no opaque layers. There's no concrete over your neshama. And so you're able to actually have a sensory experience of elikus, of godliness. And that means that you are able to act as a coach, as an in-between, as a connection. The terminology that's used in Chassidus is a mamutza, a go-between. You're able to facilitate for other people to have a sensory experience of godliness by developing their relationship with you, because you have that sensory experience. By all means, educate people and inform them about the value of diverting their focus away from materialism, because you have something so much greater to offer them. You have the ability to actually offer them a sensory experience of godliness. You have the ability to offer them the opportunity to actually experience the joy and the pleasure of having a connection with Hashem, beyond just what we can achieve with our minds. We can achieve amazing things through learning Chassidus. But what we can achieve through Hiskashrus to a Rebbe is a whole different ballgame. That's an actual sensory experience of elikus that you can't get through learning. So he said, if you are a Rebbe, by all means, it's an amazing thing. But if you're not a Rebbe, and you don't really have any better Wi-Fi signal to godliness than we do, and you've convinced us all to lose interest in all the joy and pleasure that the world has to offer, but you can't offer a replacement of anything better, then you belong in prison, because that's not something you get to do to people. You cannot take away people's opportunity to experience pleasure and joy in life. People need pleasure and joy. People need pleasure and joy, first of all, just to survive and to cope, let alone to enjoy life and to wake up and to look forward to their day. We do need that. Now, that pleasure and joy doesn't have to come from ice cream. It doesn't have to come from, from TikTok, but it does have to come from somewhere. And that's why his response, which maybe at first might not have seemed like it made much sense at all, right? If talking us out of material pleasure and joy and being focused on that is a bad thing, it's a bad thing. If it's a good thing, it's a good thing. Well, not necessarily. If you can't offer something better, it's a terrible thing and you belong in prison. That's why he said, if you're not a Rebbe, then you belong in prison for writing Talmud. Because if you are, then you've done something invaluable. And that's the opportunity that we have. And this is why all of these Yomim Tovim throughout the month of Kislev that are associated with the Rabbeim, we make such a big deal out of it. Because, and it's easy to miss the point and for almost, celebrating, whether it's Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which, when the Rebbe came back home, or this thing for this Rebbe and that Yom Tov for that Rebbe and all these things for the Rabbeim, it can almost, if we lose focus inside of what's really going on, it can almost seem like, okay, we're a Chassid, so we have an obligation to celebrate the Rebbe's thing. And it's like, that's not what it's supposed to be. I mean, look, if that's where someone's at, okay, I guess it's better than nothing, but still missing out on what this is really all about. What this is about is that a good thing for the Rebbe is a good thing for us. Because the Rebbe, for us, is the gateway to a human sensory experience of infinity, of the true absolute infinity of Hashem, of infinite divinity. We are able to, through a relationship with the Rebbe, actually have a sensory experience of the infinity of the Creator. So, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and Rosh Chodesh Kislev gave us along to, sometimes people ask today, is it Rosh Chodesh Kislev? I understand why people celebrated it then, but like to us now, maybe some people might struggle to understand what difference Rosh Chodesh Kislev makes to us now after Gimel Tammuz, and the answer is, makes a huge difference. First of all, there are many, we had, many additional years of Sichos and of Mamarim and of Torah that the Rebbe gave us, and of stories and interactions that Chassidim had with the Rebbe, and letters that the Rebbe wrote to people, and Yechidus and responses that the Rebbe gave to people. And all of these things are not only opportunities to learn Chassidus, they're also opportunities to develop our relationship with the Rebbe. And this is something that I think really the Rebbe's letters and Igros Kodesh are amazing for, because they give you a very different insight into the Rebbe than just the Sichos and Mamarim. Because Sichos and Mamarim are information, it's learning, it's Torah, it's academic. The Rebbe's letters, sometimes you get to see a little bit of the Rebbe's sense of humor. You get to see the Rebbe's practical approach to things and pragmatic take on things. And it's in a way more of an insight into the Rebbe as a human being, as a person, rather than just as a teacher of Chassidus. And all of these things are tools to develop our relationship with the Rebbe, and our relationship with the Rebbe is the key to being able to have the opportunity to have a human, sensory, experiential connection with Hashem.
Yeah, so
Sure.
What's of all, when you say like connection with the Rebbe, because you were comparing connection to the Rebbe versus the connection of Chassidus through a sefer. Nowadays, our connection to the Rebbe is always through a sefer, essentially. It's always, so it's, is that still considered a relationship with the Rebbe? That's getting.
Okay, good. So that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because it's probably important to clarify. I would say there are two different things. Like when we learn Chassidus, right, there's the academic experience, which is that we now understand Chassidus, which helps us develop our own, image, whatever that means, of Hashem, which allows us to develop a sense of personal connection with Hashem. Learning the Rebbe's Torah also develops our connection to the Rebbe, which is a separate thing to the academic benefit that we get from learning and understanding, is learning the Rebbe's Torah. And that's why I mentioned, for example, learning Igros Kodesh, the Rebbe's letters, which are not just about the information, it's about actually, it's almost like the Rebbe becomes more of a person. It's hard to describe, but that's kind of like what I feel like it is. Like, I feel like when I learn the Rebbe's letters, that makes me picture the Rebbe as a person and think of the Rebbe as a Rebbe, rather than just the material that the Rebbe is teaching.
Practically, what does that benefit as far as like how is that Hiskashrus, like who's
So it's a good question, and it's not such a simple answer because
at the end of the day, someone's relationship with the Rebbe could stay intellectual all the way through.
it could. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. One of the things the Rebbe said is that the way to connect to the Rebbe is by learning the Rebbe's Torah. Ultimately,
And then at the end of the day, you don't have that like coaching kind of relationship where you're getting guidance from the
right,
Rebbe.
correct.
That aspect. Like,
Well, you can get some of that through the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's letters also, but I was using that as an equivalent. And the equivalence was when you have a coach, you get access to what they have access to because they're offering you access to what they have. So you get access to the benefit of their insight and what they've learned from their mistakes and their experience. So that's because you have a relationship with a coach, you get access to those things. Having a relationship with the Rebbe gives us access to what the Rebbe has, which is, one of the big things is an actual sensory experience of godliness.
so is there any difference with having a relationship with the Rebbe in a way that you feel like a person that you're close to versus having the Rebbe's opinions and view on the world having the biggest influence on you? Is there a big difference Hiskashrus wise?
Good question. Honestly, the more important part of it, probably technically and conceptually, is learning the Rebbe's Torah and seeing things the way the Rebbe sees them and having that perspective and doing and following the Rebbe's directives. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and this also ties into what Shmuel Lucas was saying again, we're also people. And the bottom line is, the more the Rebbe, because today, if we don't make an effort, especially, I never saw the Rebbe before Gimel Tammuz, and if I am not putting in conscious effort on an ongoing basis, the Rebbe basically becomes Moshe Rabbeinu to me, just like a Chassidish Moshe Rabbeinu instead of a Yiddish Moshe Rabbeinu, basically, right? Which is a lot better than nothing, but I'm still missing out on a lot, and it's and the personal relationship side of that is that, we are people, and there's a lot to be said for the sense of connection and relationship. First of all, in terms of the personal benefit of feeling connected and plugged in, which is a very valuable thing for people. And the bottom line is, feeling that sense of connection is also realistically going to increase our motivation and the likelihood of us engaging in the other more technically important parts of Hiskashrus more consistently and more effectively, I think. So yes, technically and conceptually, it's the less important, the personal aspect is the less important part of Hiskashrus, but for human beings, it's pragmatically, I think it's a very, very important part. And like I said, it also has its own value to offer because we're humans, and the conscious experience is also very important.
So is that where like stories of the Rebbe play into like
Yeah.
help build that human connection?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's like, so you're saying that the general Hiskashrus, the goal of Hiskashrus is not necessarily to have that human connection where you feel like the Rebbe is my Rebbe versus the second point where it has an influence on you?
Technically speaking. Practically speaking, I don't know that it's so simple to say which one's more important. I think it's probably both of them really are important. One is more important from a technical and conceptual side, which is the learning and the behaviors. The other side is very, very important from a pragmatic human side. And that is, look, there are some people who are just very academic or very clinical, and they can just like buckle down and do the things and do the learning, and they don't need the human personal side so much. But most of us do. And also I just want to clarify that it could almost sound like what I'm saying is really the important part is the technical side and the learning and the doing, because we're pathetic humans and we need to have that kind of thing. So, we need to focus on that too, just to make sure that it should work. But it's not really like that at all. Hashem designed us this way, which means that if it's important practically for us to have a sense of connection, that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's an important part of the human condition, the way that Hashem created it, which means that that's a positive thing and it's supposed to be there and it's supposed to be important, which means it may not fit in, it may not seem as important from the technical side, but the bottom line is Hashem designed us exactly the way he wanted us to be, which means that if that is important for us pragmatically, it's supposed to be an important part of the picture.
So like sometimes it seems like a really big Chassidim nowadays are people who put a lot of focus in that area, knowing stories of the Rebbe, knowing the Yom progress, dressing like the Rebbe's things, I don't know, all these little details. And sometimes
I think you just maybe combined two very different things, but
okay, the
either
third
way.
one drop that one. But then, I'm just saying the idea of like
maybe that's why. Maybe because, also the bottom line is, the fact is 30 years ago, they didn't need to tell stories of the Rebbe to feel that connection. They could just like show up in 770 on Shabbos or for Shachris 7 days a week. They. Sorry?
We heard a lot of stories.
Right, but you weren't as dependent on them as we are now, right? It's like now it's kind of that's what we've got. So I think that's probably a big part of why. It also, it's like I said, different people have different personalities and different people are going to emphasize different things. But yeah, maybe that's why I think a lot of people emphasize that. Is it also depends, I think probably the people who are generally the more sort of emotional, sensory connection kind of people are probably going to, their farbrengens are going to be a lot more kind of stories and, because that's the thing that's at the forefront for them. And then you have people whose farbrengens tend to be a little different. Different people are going to focus on different things, but I think it's important that people do focus on those things because we're human and we need it. And yeah, we can't just turn up at 770 on Shabbos and hear the Rebbe talk and see the Rebbe davening, and it's not an option for us, unfortunately. So stories and the Rebbe's letters and those sort of things are what we've got. Good Chodesh, L'chaim.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if I catch a photo. Let me just, in Living Chassidus, boom.